Today, we're going to look at some of the predictions for the future of how the electronics industry will perform next year. And we're talking to Adam Fletcher, who is chairman of the ecsn. So welcome, and thank you for coming, Adam. Great to talk to you.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to talk with you, Ian. And I joined ecsn back in 2005, so I've been chairman for around about 15 years now. I'm also chairman of the International Distribution of Electronics Association, which is the global association of local industry associations. Sounds a bit complex, but ecsn really looks at the UK market, and we look at components from cradle to grave to rebirth. So that's our remit, and our members range from component manufacturers, universities, through to authorized distributors, and also end-of-life users. So quite a wide range of members within our organization. So really the answer is it's electronic components, cradle to grave. Every year we try to provide a forecast for the market based on what our members think is going to happen in the market in the year in front. And that always involves us in quite a lot of interesting discussions and chats with everybody through November, and we start to bring together the forecast. Last year, or the current year that we're in now, 2020, we could see was going to be quite a difficult year, even back last November. And we forecast last year that we could only really bring to the market a forecast for the first half of the year, and then guidance for the second half. But the data that we put out last year said that in 2020, the UK electronic components market would decline in the range 11.5% to minus 6%. So we were always looking at a decline for 2020. And obviously with all the things that have happened this year that have really been quite unprecedented, then we've seen quite a significant change. And we're forecasting that for the current year, and we have to, in order to forecast for 2021, try to work out where we're going to close 2020. And we think that the end of year forecast is pretty close. We think we're going to be somewhere between -8% and -6% below the previous year in terms of billings for the UK industry. So that's where we start our forecast for the year. So is that good, bad, or indifferent? Well, obviously we'd all like to see growth, but that's not been possible this year for every obvious reasons. The first being COVID-19, the second one being the ongoing trade dispute between the US and China, which has impacted the market, and just a general decline across many industry sectors. So if we look at where the UK is in terms of its decline in GDP, actually the UK electronic components market has performed slightly better. So we think that if we can achieve a decline of around about 6% on the previous year, that's probably not too bad. In fact, it's probably a pretty reasonable achievement based on a lot of other market sectors who have done significantly worse. They'd probably be very happy with that as a result. So obviously, we'd like to have seen growth. So then we start to think about what's going to happen in 2021. And we raised the issue a couple of years ago about known unknowns and unknown unknowns and unknown unknowns that you can't really see what's happening. And this year's particularly difficult. And so as a result, we've really got to forecast 2021 as two halves. We can provide a forecast for the first 6 months, and then our guidance, our best guidance for the what we think will be the balance of the year. And so what we did last year is we came out in mid-year and then forecast what we thought was going to happen at the end of the year. So that's why our forecasts are generally reasonably accurate. So we think that the first half of 2021, the UK electronic components market will move or grow. Actually, the range we have is a decline of 2%, a midpoint of 0.5% growth, and the maximum of the range is around about a 4% growth. So that's not a bad stab at the first half of next year, where we have Brexit and a whole load of other things coming in into the equation alongside continuing problems with COVID-19, which are beginning to diminish, and also some of the impacts of the bigger geopolitical impacts, particularly in North America and China. So the full year guidance that we're offering, so we try to provide that information so that people can see it. We think that the full year will be somewhere between zero, i.e. no growth, a mid-range of 2.7%, or a top-end growth of around 6.5%. And
that's very good, yeah.
We're fairly confident with that. We think that that's probably reasonably good. And there was a lot of discussion. There was a very wide and diverse view amongst our members as to where we were going to be. But we tried to be very careful. We spent a lot of time analysing the numbers and the inputs from everybody. And we get from our members every month their data. And we touch some 400 data points. And so we have a very good historic record. And what we're trying to do is map that forward and try to figure out, looking at various different scenarios, how all the different components will grow. So I think that's a reasonable stab at next year. I think it's probably been harder than in other years. The only slight problem that we're seeing right now, and that people really need, customers really need to think about, is lead times. And we've started to see the lead times creep out. Really started around early October. Lead times jumped by a couple of weeks, and then they jumped by another couple of weeks. I'm talking average lead times, not the individual components, but averagely lead times started to jump out. We were sort of surprised at why that would be. And I think one of the reasons for that is that Asia Pac, including China, which account today for over 50% of the electronic components market, continue to grow very strongly. We're seeing quite a lot of divestment of companies coming out of China and going into Vietnam and other places. So Samsung, for instance, have moved all their handset manufacture out of China into Vietnam, which is a big change. And also we're seeing a change in the way that the Chinese build up to the Lunar New Year and their Lunar New Year holidays. And the Chinese authorities have effectively increased that holiday by around about 5 days. But what a lot of the provinces have done is they've extended that. So a holiday that would normally be 5 days is now, for many people, 2 weeks. For organizations manufacturing and building product in China, what we're seeing is they're pulling material in because they're now trying to catch up. They're trying to build early so that they don't have a hole in their schedule. And we've also seen, which is unusual, is that some of the big contract manufacturers are actually paying their people triple time to defer their holidays and keep working. So I think that little spike is causing the lead times to move out.
So what components are they mainly that we're seeing large lead times on?
Oh, a wide range, and that's why I'm saying I'm talking averages, and within an average, you can have your foot in the freezer and your foot in the fire, and on average you're okay. So it's not a very good measure. So what we're concerned about is that a lot of commodity, what I call merchant market commodity products, that's where no vendor dominates the market. They just put their product on the market and it sells at whatever price they can get for it. They are really starting to jump out. Things like MLCCs, memory products, very standard products like MOSFETs. I think we're going to see the problem isn't in what most buyers would see as A category and B category parts. I think they're relatively stable and relatively safe. Their lead times might go out, but you can provide for that with your order cover and everything else. The problem is really going to be in the massive C parts where people really don't perhaps pay as much attention. Some of those, because they're highly commodity, are jumping out quite quickly. The other thing that we're seeing is that with this US-China trade war and the impact that's had on Huawei, it has caused an enormous surge in demand for wafer starts and back-end testing and assembly. And that's really beginning to drive the big foundries into much longer lead times. TSMC are really, have got very, very strong order books right now. And that's making demand for a lot of semiconductors actually step out quite significantly. I think that it's a blip in the first half of the year. I think we'll see a little blip into the first quarter, and it will then
it'll then improve. Yeah.
However,
that's great.
Well, that's just part of the equation. If I look at how the markets move, if I look at Europe, North America, and Japan, they experience most of their growth typically in the first half of the year. So we typically peak our growth in Q2. That's counter-cyclical with what happens in Asia Pac. In Asia Pac, they tend to have a very low first half, and they peak in the second half, and they typically peak in around the October-November timeframe, which sort of ties with what we're seeing with lead times now, that we're seeing their peak of demand. What troubles me is when I look at the shape of growth for the UK and Europe and North America and Japan, we're seeing it all very back-end loaded. All the growth is going to come really in the second half of the year, and probably most of it in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Added to that, the growth of 5G infrastructure, 5G handsets. What troubles me is we're heading towards a perfect storm where all of the demand by all of the global components markets peaks at the same time. And what's going to happen there is lead times are going to cascade out quite significantly. So I think that's my real worry for next year. The first quarter, I think, will come back into balance. My concern is it will build towards the end of the year, and then we could have a real problem because everybody's fighting for the material. And given that the build that we're looking at, the build out that's being forecast for 5G handsets and 5G infrastructure, I think we could end up with some very severe shortages in the semiconductor market and in some of the more commodity merchant market products as well. So I think that's my fear, and it's trying to manage that demand, and that's why we're trying to encourage everybody to engage across their supply network, both up and down their supply network, and provide a great deal more business intelligence than they have in the past. Because if we don't have good business intelligence, then we're struggling. Everybody's struggling. Now, to get over Brexit, there's two things that have happened there. Really, authorized distributors on behalf of the manufacturers and their customer base, bearing in mind that in the UK, authorized distributors serve over 99% of the customers. Yeah. So they've stocked up, and we're currently sitting on around about 12 to 14 weeks of average demand in the UK. So I think this little Brexit cycle, we should have sufficient material to meet everybody's need, despite what may happen at borders. So we might have some issues, but where that inventory is held in the UK, there won't be a problem. Many of the global distributors are holding their inventory outside of the UK, and that could be an issue. And so what many of the global people are doing is actually shipping early. So we're pulling forward. They're pulling forward shipments for material that was due in the first 2 weeks of January. They're actually shipping them in December with the agreement with the customer.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Adam. That's been really interesting and really informative. Really appreciate your insights into what we think we're going to see next year in the electronics market. Thank you very much indeed for giving us your thoughts.
Yeah, my best wishes to everybody in the electronic notes market. Good luck for 2021. It's going to be an interesting ride. Let's see how we get on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.